how did you think about your career? Like when you were entering your undergraduate studies, what vision did you have, and how did you end up kind of moving toward Penguin and specifically publishing?
The world's third largest, most unusual media empire in the world. And that's what caught my eye.
In this world, with young people on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, how do you see the role of books?
We had our most successful year last year in 35 years in India, right? We're not producing a product. This is not what we do. This product doesn't talk back at you. If it's qualitatively defective, throw it away, right? A book talks back at you because your brand is your author. It is not a product that is not alive. A book is alive. Life journey, it molds you, right? It gives you a mindset. It gives you direction without you knowing it at that point in time.
Okay, I'll be quieter. I won't be so loud, Krishna. You can just say it directly. You don't have to disguise it in this Trojan horse fashion. We believe in radical candor here. Okay?
Yeah, let's go there.
Good? Everything good?
All good.
Okay.
I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah, phone silent is there. Okay.
We can roll.
Okay. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Chat Masala. Super excited to have with us Gaurav Shrinagesh, who is the CEO of Penguin Random House India and Southeast Asia. We're going to have a bunch of questions for him on his life as well as his work. Super excited. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Since we have so many young viewers and so many of them love to read, love the world of ideas, would love to start by learning what you were like as a teenager. What sort of activities interested you, and how did they shape who you've become today?
Well, I was in boarding school from a very young age, 5 onwards.
5 years old? Or?
5 years old, yeah.
Oh my God.
Which was good. And in boarding, you have to be amiable, right? You have to be pliable and flexible. So there was no one size fits all. I was very much into sports. And at that time, if you were into sports vis-a-vis academics, it was always better. I think things have changed now with the tech world coming into being. Sports was key.
Nerds,
I'm sorry? Yes. No, not at all. Sports was key. So I spent a lot of time in sports. I was not a very good student in terms of academics, but sports was my forte.
What sports do you spend the most? Okay, soccer. Okay, lovely. Yeah. Soccer, not football. Fantastic. In fact, we have a team member from Sanawar where you went to boarding school. So she had some specific questions for you.
Oh, wow.
She wanted to ask, did you ever win the Hudson?
No, I did not. Okay. Unfortunately, I was not much of a long distance runner, but I could do the short sprint.
And this question, I think you already asked. She wanted to know, are you a soccer guy or a cricket guy?
Yeah, football, soccer, through and through.
Okay, fantastic. Lovely. And kind of moving to college and so on, how did you think about your career? Like when you were entering your undergraduate studies, what vision did you have, and how did you end up kind of moving toward Penguin and specifically publishing?
Well, God's honest truth, I didn't. At that point in time, I think I was probably a lot more freewheeling. I took a year off once I finished college and kind of traveled around India. My first job was more of a default as opposed to anything that was thought out, but it was in sales. And sales is, I think, a job that everyone must do at some point in their
Someone else
lives.
also mentioned this.
Did they? Which I agree with completely. Mm-hmm. All I knew at that point in time was I wanted to go abroad. And that was my goal, that was my aim. Mm-hmm. I didn't make it because, as I said, I was never a studious character, so there was no question of financial aid. And it was not until about 27, 28, and again, this happened on account of a very dear friend of mine. I remember I had jaundice and I was laid up in bed. And we were doing our own business at that point in time in furniture and interior design. And he called up and said, Gaurav, you've got to go. It's time. and he loaned me money. This is back in '97,
Oh, amazing.
which was an amazing thing. I had no cash to kind of guarantee anything. Off I went to Melbourne Business School, and I did general management there. And I was in Manila at the AIM Institute for an exchange program. A friend of mine was in the library, and I happened to be waiting for him, and he was taking a long time. So I walked in to hurry him up, and there was a Forbes magazine lying there, and I remember the cover so clearly. It said, "The world's third largest, most unusual media empire in the world," and that's what caught my eye, and that was Bertelsmann back in '98 August. So I remember writing to the CEO at that point in time, and I introduced myself.
You just wrote to the CEO.
Just wrote to the CEO.
Right.
I think that's the best way to do it, right?
Amazing.
Email, I think, was circulating at that point. I didn't have his email ID, so I think I tried every combination in BCC. And it obviously got to him, and rest
And
is
what are you
history.
saying? That so you just read about a company in Forbes, and you're like, "This is amazing," and you just tried every permutation and combination. What did you write in that email that got him to respond? I'm curious.
It was nothing cerebral. It was short. What caught my eye was the fact that they wanted to expand in Asia. I've always known that I've wanted to be in Asia. I love Southeast Asia because home was there for the last, we lived there for about 14 years, I think. That's where mom and dad were. And I wrote to him, I remember it said, you guys are looking to expand in Asia. I'd love to be part of that journey. And they got back to me in January, I remember. That was the first call. So I wrote to them in August, September. They got back to me in Jan, in '99 Jan. And it took about 6-7 months of a little bit of back and forth. Because remember, they're in Germany, right? In a small town called Gütersloh, which is really in the middle of nowhere. And it was fabulous. Bertelsmann's a brilliant company. They're very entrepreneurial. They encourage you to be entrepreneurial. I got into a program which is called the Bertelsmann Executive Program. It's called BEP, and they pick a few students a year, only from the Ivies. So me coming in from Melbourne, which was a great business school in Asia, but not an Ivy, I think was the first. And they allowed me to experiment, get to know the media business. I worked in publishing. I worked in M&A. I worked in music in New York. Then I moved to China, where I was in retail and direct marketing. And then publishing kind of happened by chance because I left Bertelsmann in 2008 October. Parzad, my wife, was expecting. She was based in Hong Kong. And I moved there, and I have, you write your thank you very muches and all of that. I wrote to 4 people I was very close to, and Brian, who was the head of international sales at that point in time, wrote back and said, "Listen, we'd love to speak to you in India." And I thought he was calling me in for a project, so I said, "Absolutely, would love to come, provided you pay for my ticket." And he called me over, and we chatted. I didn't know him from before. And he said, "Listen, we're starting up Random House." Random House was very young in India at that time. I think it was only about 2-3 years old. And they said, "You want to build a business and the rest of it?" And I said, "Sure, it's a great journey." My wife really wanted to come back. I was on the fence because I love Hong Kong, I love Singapore. And from there on in, the journey started. 2009, I was 39, I took over the helm of Random House. And 2013, Penguin and Random House merged. And from there on in, it's just been growth, and publishing is a great industry. It's so fascinating. But I think I've spoken enough. So
No. It's amazing. I think there are so many amazing lessons for young people. We talk about how you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So taking that risk, writing to someone you really admire, someone you think is doing something cool. And I love what you said. I want to be part of that journey. And I think that perhaps really resonated with them.
Probably. I think, as I said, they're a very entrepreneurial organization. So if you take on a project, own it, run with it, and prove that there is a path to growth, they will support you, provided it's in their core business, right? And I assume the enthusiasm was, they say enthusiasm is infectious. So I did manage to, convey that, and it worked out well. I have to say.
And what were some critical skills you developed during these early years at Bertelsmann that serve you to this day?
So I think Analytical skills are very important because when I started, it was at the corporate center in Guruslow. And there you were analyzing businesses, you were analyzing companies. So you had to understand market scenarios, you had to understand market development, you had to understand the wheres and whys. So that was one very important skill set I think I picked up. The other was probably social because, I'd never been to Europe. I was 30. It was my first time actually living in Europe. And to live in Germany in a very small town, I think their population was probably 90 or 94,000 people. I did not speak German, unfortunately. And to interact with people and make friends with people from different parts of the world and from Germany itself, that's very important. And I think that's a very important skill set all of us need to carry. Because social empathy and social communication, if you actually look at it, we're doing it all the time, right? No matter what line of business you're in, that is so critical.
Is there a connection between your sports? You talked about being an avid athlete as a young person. Did that help you in socially connecting deeply and meaningfully with people down the road? Or am I extrapolating here?
No, it's a good question. It was a combination, right? Because I think one of the things which boarding school does is it no, I don't want to use the word forces, but it does encourage you to be socially active.
Right.
Because remember, you are with a large number of kids.
Yeah.
You've got to survive. You've got to engage. So I think that training started very early. Also living abroad in the 70s. I think India was a very different place, if you remember, at that point in time. Oh, well, you might not remember, you would have been born. Well, India was very different, right? So to live in Southeast Asia, to see the development Singapore had, even late 70s, early 80s, very far-sighted, meeting people from different parts of the world, all of that kind of helped. Sports, I think, is a great leveler, right? In every form and shape. You can take, whether it's individual prowess, whether it's team building, communication is so important. Every element just kicks off with sports.
Got it.
In my view.
That's why I think to this day, U.S. universities put such a premium on sports. It's probably for the same reason. I want to quickly backtrack to that year you took off, and we kind of sped through it, but I want to understand what transpired when you were traveling around India. And would you recommend, I know a lot of, we have these conversations, a lot of students and parents are hesitant about taking a gap year. But what role did that play, and how did that help you figure out your next steps?
I think huge, right? We put so much pressure on ourselves to succeed. We have to get 100% in our studies. We have to have a plan of action the moment you finish college, blah, 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 right? But I think what a year does, it gives you time. It gives you time with yourself. It gives you time to experiment. It gives you time to think. It just gives you time to chill out, right?
And where did you go during this?
So I took up a project actually with a company called Invest India, if memory serves me right, in Delhi. A small-term project. And the reason I took it up was because they were doing an exhibition in Bombay, and I wanted to get back to Bombay. Right? And we didn't come from a lot of economic, financial, backing. So I had to do something. And I remember, I think they paid me $3,000 for a few months, and I was like, yes, I'm there. And that was great because, again, you interacted with people. I traveled down to Kerala. I went down to the south of India as well. I did some travels in the north. I love the north as well. And I think all of that just culminates, right? At that point in time, there is no tick box. You don't know what you're learning, but you're learning because it's life experience. And I think anything to do with life experience is a great teacher.
No, I think that's really helpful because I think nowadays a lot of our lives are scripted. Okay, go from A to B to C. There's a schedule for everything, but sometimes the unstructured, let me explore life, let me interact with people who are very different from me. I think that was
it does
critical
help,
for journey.
right? Because it's kind of that's part of your journey. That's part of your life journey. And I do think a life journey is so, for me personally, right? I don't know if I should be saying this to your
No,
kids'
of
parents,
course.
but
No, we want to know from you.
life journey, it molds you, right? It gives you a mindset, it gives you direction without you knowing it at that point in time. So I think we've got to let our kids be. We've got to, give them some time to just be, which I don't think they get a lot of time to do nowadays.
Great point. Lovely. Since we're on this topic, what if you could communicate a message to every young person, 20-year-old across the planet, what piece of advice would you give them?
Learn to breathe. Take a breath.
Pranayama courses.
And that has so many ramifications, right? You're calm. You can think about things. You're not dashing. Things will be okay. You might be going through, and we all go through it, right? As teenagers, as young kids, we're finding ourselves. So instead of running through it, and I know it's easier said than done because people do come from different backgrounds. They have different challenges. But I'm not saying take a breath, sit back and do nothing. You can be on your journey. You can be on your journey, for example, to go abroad to study. But you can take a breath. Just take a breath, think through it. Don't have to get stressed out. Because ultimately, if you put in the hard work, things will work out. That's my firm belief.
Oh, that's wonderful. Hard work seems to be your middle name, because looking through your LinkedIn, we've got, in addition to Melbourne, then Asian Institute of Management, INSEAD, Michigan, Ross School of Business, INSEAD again, Harvard Business School, Stanford Graduate School of Business. How did you think about your post-secondary education, and what were the skills you were looking for in these various programs? And basically, how should young people think about learning on the job versus various programs for upgrading their skills?
I was reading about, I was listening to Jordan Peterson. He's a brilliant author. Just this morning, actually. And he said a really interesting thing about communication. He said, when you're speaking to people, think about, don't just speak about what you know, right? Know a lot more. So if I kind of rewind that back, I can't say with a surety that was my way of thinking, but probably it was at some point where I was not thinking about upgrading skill sets for what I was doing, but I was probably thinking one or two steps ahead in terms of, probably if my career is going in this direction, that's the skill set I'll need going forward. And that was probably the INSEAD and the Ross School, and these are executive programs, right? They're not full-fledged certificate or degree programs. And then I kind of rewind to Bertelsmann. Bertelsmann's very, very good at engaging about sitting down with you as you go up the hierarchy to figure out what skill sets would add value to what you're doing, not only in terms of job, but in terms of people as well. So I think it was at Harvard where we did the Mastering New Challenges program. And this would have happened probably about 5-6 years back. The idea was about thinking ahead. What are the challenges that are going to come through 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the line, and beginning to work on those. So it was a combination of self-thought. It was a combination of sitting down with the company you're working with and trying to figure out what are the skill sets you require, and just working through that and having fun with it.
To me, this connects to what you said previously, in that learning to breathe, it seems that allows you to be more forward-thinking, more reflective, more analytical, as you said. So I think one thing we encourage our young people is always come back better than yesterday, and dedicate yourself to lifelong learning. So curious, what are some things you're thinking about right now? If you were to join another program, what would you like to learn at this stage in your career?
So I'll just step back for a second in terms of learning to breathe. I'm still learning to breathe. Right?
Okay.
When I'm at work, I do tend to get very impulsive and emotional and the rest of it, but it is very important. In terms of next steps, That's a really good question.
Basically, if you could go back to school and study whatever you want for 2 years, what would that be right now?
it would be sports management. if I did have that opportunity.
Full circle, yeah.
Because I think, and it runs with me and my son as well, Veeru, we love sports, right? And I think that's the one thing I would like to do.
And if you could manage any sports team
Liverpool.
in the world, okay.
Liverpool, yeah. There's no question about it.
Okay.
But to answer your question about thinking, sorry, I didn't answer that question. For me, it's, there are so many changes coming through in the world that we're living in, right? I mean, tech is the driver of it all. And we see that in our industry as well, in publishing, in media, in education. And the idea is very simple. I think it's just about engaging with people who are masters in their field, understanding from them how they're thinking about the future, and then trying to just link it up to see how what's happening in this beautiful big world will impact what it is that you're trying to do in a very small way.
Got it. Now, since you mentioned tech, let's get to another question, which is, in this world with young people on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, how do you see the role of books and how is Penguin thinking about its role in this world moving forward in the coming decades?
Books play a really important role in society, in culture, in shaping minds. They have done it before, they'll do it now, and they will forever do it. I don't believe books are going anywhere because ultimately books are stories. And for time immemorial, human beings love stories. They might come in different formats, but stories are here to stay, right? In terms of knowledge, beautiful journey with books, education, learning, skill sets, books, mind, body, spirit, we were talking about it, books. You take any category of life, and there are so many people who've written such wonderful books about their views, about their thoughts. And as Penguin, our mission is very simple. It's to bring stories, to inform and entertain everyone anywhere in the world.
Oh, that's perfect.
And with that being the premise, unfortunately, we cannot publish everything that comes to us. And, my wonderful team of publishers and editors, it's a very tough job, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to take a piece of great content that somebody's written or are in the process of writing and structuring it to what you believe the reader would like to read. And that's tough.
I want to delve into that. How do you balance, because authors are artists, to a large extent, but then there's also the commercial side. How do you balance those two? How do you balance, I'm an author, this is what I want to say to the world, but we also have to think about, hey, what is the market looking for? How do you navigate those conversations?
They're tough conversations, right? Because it's internal and external. And for good reason, every author will believe that their book is the biggest seller. And they must believe that because that's where the passion comes from. Unfortunately, what also happens in publishing is, you go to any bookstore, right? You look at the number of books that a bookstore has. And kudos to bookstores to keep those many SKUs in their stores. Because if you look at it from a per square foot perspective, profit and all that, that's where the commercials come in. For us, I think at Penguin Random House, we're very, very clear. The book part of it, the content part of it, is where the publishers and editors engage with authors. They're the professional. I'm not a publisher, right? I'm an administrator. That's the way I look at myself. And that's what they do. That's what they're really good at. What we do is try and give them platforms, tools, to try and enable them to make better decisions. And that's where the commercial comes in. Right? How do you balance a great book and how do you get that to the reader? How do you take a book to a consumer? The publishing business, I know everybody looks at it and says, oh, it's the death knell of publishing. Ebook comes out. Oh, it's the death knell. Not at all. As as my ex-boss Marcus used to say and still says, it's the best time in publishing. We had our most successful year last year in 35 years in India, right? So from a commercial perspective, what we need to do is we need to take that book, we need to give it the discoverability channels that we can. We need to try and get it to where the consumers are. And then the consumers will take the call in terms of whether they take it up or they choose to go to another book, right? You can't force fit it. You can't put it down their throat. That's what makes it interesting, challenging. And there are many structural challenges within the publishing industry. Remember, paper. So one of the things we've done, and sorry I'm deviating a little bit, but I get really excited, right? What we do is we use FSCI paper, which is, and one of the things we've also started doing is using recycled paper. Authors love that. There's value in it. But we don't do it because authors only love it. We do it because we need to give back to the world as well. So this kind of resonates with the earlier question about how Penguin is thinking about the future as well. Balancing out creative and commercial is a challenge. There's no doubt about it, right? Because you're taking a bet. We're talking about startups in the world, and of course, those startups are at a very different scale. But if you actually think about it,
a book is a startup.
A book is a startup, right? We're doing 300 small startups every year. We're venture capitalists in a way.
Yeah.
In a very minuscule, tiny sort of way.
Yeah,
but that's what we do, right? We place a bet on a book in the hope that it will find its place in the world.
That's
you
brilliant.
win some, you lose some, but that's life.
I've never thought of publishing as a VC firm, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking it in a very small sense.
No,
right?
in a very real sense. Okay, I get that. I think this dovetails to another question we had, and I think in one of your an article about you, you mentioned that you're a numbers guy, and I'm sure Penguin is full of word people who love words. How do you effectively lead a team of word people as a numbers business guy?
You leave them be to a large extent because they're creatives, right? They know their shit. They know what they're doing, right? I try and add a little value because on the nonfiction side or the business side, I probably have a view. One of the interesting things we do is the way we acquire a book, right? The editors or the editor brings in the book that they're passionate about. They then have their editorial meeting, and it's only with the editors and the publisher, right? They then bring that idea to the acquisitions table. Now, the acquisitions table is where you've got the editors, you've got the sales, you've got marketing, and you've got me when I'm available as well. And there we discuss and debate, right? They used to be very fiery. But over time, we've also learned that, and fiery is good because fiery brings out passion, right? But ultimately, two things will happen. Either we will all agree together that the commercial resonance of a particular book is very low, and we will not be able to do it justice, right? Or we will say, okay, we believe we could potentially take a punt and take this forward. Sorry, three things will happen. Or the third thing is an editor will be so passionate about a book that we will support that editor. And my job is to ensure that the editors don't get bogged down by, oh my God, this is such a big risk and it's going to come on my head. No, it's not. It is about working together and taking a decision together. So tomorrow, if the book succeeds, the team takes the credit. If the book doesn't do as well as we'd hoped, and that's fine. Everything is not hunky-dory. As I said, it's not as easy as I make it sound. There's, of course, battles, there's disagreements, but that's part of the course.
And that's part of healthy organization, I would assume. You have different perspectives who feel very strongly. But how do you facilitate those discussions? I think that's something that a lot of startups, young dynamic organizations face. How do you align visions and ensure that these fiery debates happen in a healthy way? Any specific tips you have?
I think the first thing would be to probably have, and I know everybody says this, but it's so true, to go back to focus. What is it that we're trying to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with that. Right. Do we get into blame games at times? Oh yes, it happens. It happens in the organization I run as well. It shouldn't be happening, but it does. But I think getting that focus is very important in the first step to align everyone.
What are
in
we
the same
trying
direction.
to do? Yeah. Okay.
What is that mission? What is that value we're trying to build? What is the end goal? Right. And that's tough. That's very tough because you've got the creative. You've got the marketeers, you've got the supply chain folk, you've got the distribution folk, you've got the warehouse folk, you've got the sales folk, and overarching all of this, you've got the author, right? We're not producing a product. This is not what we do. This product doesn't talk back at you. If it's qualitatively defective, throw it away, right? A book talks back at you because your brand is your author. It is not a product that is not alive. A book is alive. And when that is the case, it will not be 100% streamlined. It can't be. And it shouldn't be, right? But if things deviate, you try and bring them. I've had, shouting matches with my publishers. And really, I think real shouting matches, right? But the good thing is, I think we've got that trust that literally 30 seconds later, we'll be on the phone and we're talking about something else. My publisher right now, Millie, I've known her since the time I joined. Great relationship, great rapport. Do we agree on everything? Not at all. We probably disagree more than we agree, right? But you've got to have faith in them. You've got to have faith in that process.
How did you build this trust? I think this concept of trust is so powerful. And how do you maintain that? And how do you cultivate that in a new professional relationship?
I think you have to empower. That's very important. Do I do that 100%? No, I don't. I'm a very hands-on operational manager. You have to believe that they have faith in what they're doing and they're doing it for the right reasons. The moment if I go out there with mistrust, as in to say, you know what, at the back of my eye, I don't believe what you're doing. I think you're doing, it's never going to work, right? I think one of the key things is we have to allow people to make mistakes. And I keep telling my team, make a mistake, just don't make the same mistake twice. Because then, that's a question mark, right? I think you have to keep nudging people to own. It's very important. There's so much, a lot of it is on the fly. I wish I was, you've got some great leaders who are very, they've got that focus, they've got the vision, talk, everything works. I'm all over the place.
No, but I think, we've been doing some research on this, and I think this concept of leadership style may be outdated. You need to have multiple styles for multiple situations and multiple people, and have an entire toolkit. So maybe that's
you do because you can't be everything to everyone, right? When I was growing up, one of my biggest challenges was I couldn't say no. I just couldn't say no because I felt the need that I had to be acknowledged, right? But one of the things you have to do when you lead people, I think you have to lead by example. That's and this is an older adage, but it's so true. You have to lead by example. You have to let people know what they're doing and why they're doing it. What we do in the publishing business, we create impact. We have purpose. And I do think that the team that I work for at Penguin Random House has that direction, has that purpose.
Amazing. Lovely. Okay. Last question on Penguin specifically. I mean, it's amazing your tenure. First with Bertelsmann and then Penguin. I mean, the parent company and then Penguin, which has spanned basically your entire career. And in the last 10 years, heading Penguin, how have you reinvented yourself? How have you developed your leadership style? What has been that growth journey?
Oh, wow. That's so I'll take that in 3 buckets, right?
Okay.
There's the personal bucket, there's the professional bucket, and there's the social bucket, right? I think a great journey for me has been the birth of my kids. And even though Veer is 14, so it started, 14 years ago, that's had a tremendous impact on my life. In terms of, I remember when I first saw him, it just put me in touch with my mortality. It was just looking into her eyes and you knew, right? It was just a beautiful moment, right? And something happened. I don't know what happened, but something happened. And that's when the personal journey started towards self-introspection, towards trying to say, okay, how do I need to be a better person? How do I need to be a better dad? How do I need to be a better son, a better, husband, a better friend? Succeeded in some, failed in some, but that's a journey as you go along. Professionally, it was about learning skill sets. As I said, we expanded into Southeast Asia. We're expanding into the Middle East now. I think that's very important for me, right? From a professional perspective, you keep the wheels turning. Socially, I think I've seen a real transformation. I used to be very extroverted and the rest of it, but over time, you
hang around books all the time.
And you're in books, yeah.
more introverted.
But over time, you kind of go through that journey where you say, you know what? Yes, you've been there, you've seen it, you've done that, and you kind of get a little more. I don't want to use the word selective, but just a little more quieter and more introspective. And I think it's important to reinvent. Maybe not, it doesn't have to be a 360, right? But you've got to learn as you go along. And you can learn in different aspects of life. You can learn through different things.
Okay.
So sorry, I know you're looking for A, B, C, D,
No,
E, F,
no,
but I don't have that.
I think through these sessions, we're coming to appreciate the complexity of life. We don't want to be reductionist and be like, okay, here's the formula A, B, C, D, E. It's more like, hey, here's a wide range of toolkits that a number of people have used to get what they have.
Absolutely, so, I think very well put.
I think that's why we have so many books. Lovely. Quickly, I do want to talk about this mind, body, spirit. So Penguin has a separate kind of vertical for mind, body, spirit type books. What inspired that emphasis? I'm curious.
I believe it would have been the publishers and the editors that discovered that there was a need for that journey. And we started publishing. So I'm only talking about India right now, because internationally it's a different journey, right? Probably started publishing in this field many years back, but over time, and I think we see this in society as well, right? There is a lot more emphasis we're placing now on wellness, for example. I think times have changed. Kids, all of us adults, we go through mental stresses, right? And it's about trying to understand from people who probably more enlightened, probably are more aware, probably have more clarity, and getting those viewpoints together. And I think all of us as an organization have realized that this is a very, very important journey that all of us in our own way in different points in time go through. And if you look at all the books we've published, right, they're very simplistic. We've got Sadhguru, we've got Gaurav Gopal Das, and a host of others. Daji, who we recently did as well. All coming to probably the same goal using different pathways. We don't have necessarily we do. We've got Penguin Ananda, which only publishes in Mind Body, but we've also got various imprints, and a couple of those imprints will also. So it's editor driven, it's publisher driven. The imprints are just a home where the book slots in. But as a program, is it close to our hearts? Absolutely.
Lovely. I must ask you, I mean, over the span of 10 or more years, which authors you've interacted with really left an impression on you that gave you something that you took away and apply in your life? Any stories you have?
Well, that's a really good question. So I'm trying to think of something more recent. I met with Sadhguru, and I do think he's a remarkable person. His ability to think about different aspects of life in different situations. He does put it so succinctly, right? It's easy to, and mind body is something, as I said, it's very close to my heart. So Gaurav Gopal Das as well. Again, he used to be an engineer, right? Approaching things very differently. And it's all about, as I said, take a breath, learn to breathe. Sadhguru talks about breathing. And that makes such a difference, right? I met with Lieutenant General or Major General Tiny Dhillon recently. He's written a book. You learn about spirit. You learn about motivation. Different authors coming from different aspects of life. Everyone has something to teach you. Everyone you learn something from. Again, it's not clear for me in terms of, I can't call out, oh, this one is the top dog, so to speak. But again, one interacts with so many. I met with Mrs. Pratibha Karan, who's written a book on dals for us. Dal, lentils, right?
Oh, okay.
She loves cooking, and it was just so wonderful to speak to her because she was talking about just different forms of lentils and all that you can do with it, and that's creativity, right? So there's so much
Such an
out
assortment,
there. It's
yeah.
such an assortment, absolutely.
Amazing. Okay, would love to move on to our rapid fire questions. We like to ask everyone, what's one value you hold very dear?
There are many, but my dad always used to say, if you're honest with yourself and if you're honest with people, you will always sleep well at night. So I try and live up to that as much as possible.
Wonderful. Lovely. The team wanted me to ask you, why are you not on social media?
I was talking about my journey. Social was the third pillar, which I referred to earlier. I've become a fairly private person. I think I'm on LinkedIn, and that's my professional life, and that's fine. My personal life's my personal life. And I love my wife, I love my kids, I love my dog, love my mom, love my family, and that's it, and friends. So.
Amazing. I love that. Okay. Excellence is blank.
It's a journey. I don't think you ever achieve it 100%. As long as you're putting in the effort, and this is for everyone out there, put in the effort, don't worry about the outcome, and that's your journey of excellence.
It's wonderful. Oh, yes. Let's imagine you're trapped on an island for whatever reason, and you have just one book with you. Which would that be? Or maybe if you can't answer this question, I understand.
No, this one actually is a simple one for me. I grew up with a book called The Fountainhead. Ayn Rand, right? And I love that book because it talks about Hard Rock, who's an architect, and his journey through life, and not wanting to conform, not for the sake of not wanting to conform, but because of his evolution, right? And I resonate with that book very deeply. So I think that would be, and it's a thick one, so it'll keep me occupied for quite some time.
Many weeks. Lovely. Your favorite song? Or musical genre, either?
I love Floyd. I love U2. I love Dire Straits. I love all their music.
Oh.
But if you were to ask me my favorite song, I think it would have to be Brothers in Arms, Dire Straits. Beautiful wordings.
No. Just a little spin on a question I asked before. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting off your career as a 20-year-old?
That's because my journey's been a little different, right? But again, I think if you just sit back and think about what you want your journey to be, not what you want your parents' journey to be for you or society's, but your journey, right? Think about it. Don't judge it. Don't assess it. Live it. Execute on it, and things will be fine, guys. It's particularly for the kids. It will all work out at the end of the day. Trust me on this.
Okay. That's heartwarming to know. Just a couple more. How do you structure a day? I'm sure you have so many responsibilities, so many departments. How do you organize your day, keeping in mind both the professional and personal duties?
So I'm an early riser. I start fairly early, and there used to
How
be a
early?
time. Well,
Part of the 5
I was just
a.m. club?
yeah, exactly. It's part of the 5 a.m. But I think as with age, it's probably shifted to about 6.
Okay.
I love spending those 2 hours in the morning. You know, I still pick up the paper. I love my cup of chai. I play with my dog. And then I start my emails because, you know, if you can get through, I think, a chunk of them early enough, then you have the rest of the day to interact with people, to talk to people. That's very important. You know, we've got people back to the office in a hybrid way. And I do think hybrid's here to stay. I wish I'd realized that earlier as well. But it's great when you interact with people, when you talk to people, right? I mean, the meetings are the meetings because you learn so much. And I think that's very important. I try and make it home post-lunch, and then I kind of continue from there on in. My son and my daughter and my wife, they always tell me, you know, you're always on your damn phone. You got to get off it. And that's where the balance needs to come in. But evening time, you know, I try and walk with the kids and the wife and the dog. I love watching Netflix.
What are some of your favorite shows?
I saw Fauda. I don't know if you've seen that, but that was really, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that was one that, otherwise I'm more of a channel flicker more than anything else.
Got it. You like Father, you'd like The Spy. You should check that out.
I think I've seen it.
Okay.
Is this one about Syria?
Yes.
Yes,
That's
I've
the
seen
one.
that as well, yes.
Fantastic. And then one question we love to cap with all the time. What's one change you'd love to see in the world, or in India specifically, in 2035, about a decade from now?
I think I'd like to see the progress, and we were just talking about this yesterday, about empowering women. I think it's really important for our country because the girl child has been, it's been a journey for them. It's been difficult. It still continues to be difficult. And that's something we as men, that's something we as leaders, that's something we as human beings need to ensure it happens. And I think our government is on that journey. We can always do more. And that's something I'd really love to see and contribute in whatever little way I can.
Yeah. Gaurav, this has been so insightful.
Thank you.
I think a lot of pieces of advice that I think young people really need to hear, and I've benefited as well. So thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed
Thank
this.
you for having me. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Athena.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
How's
That
it?
was good. That was really good.
Good.
If I can say so myself, I think you managed it so well.
Okay. No, thank you.
You're a
It's
natural, yeah.
It's kind of big. I'm sure you feel this all the time, but it's just such a blessing to be able to like discuss these big ideas
I think so.
with people from who've had such amazing experiences.
No, and you guys are doing something so important. This is all for the kids at the end of the day, right? And their journey. And I think the direction you give them is important. It's worth the time. Because they're so stressed. They're bam, 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 bam all the time. And this, we were talking about it earlier, right? It's this, oh, you got to get into the best, and I'm part of that club as well. But then sometimes you think, just
yes, I'm looking at Harvard and Stanford,
but it's important.
But I think what I think the big insight for me is like actually taking that step back. Sometimes taking that gap year, taking that breath, is what enhances performance, right? It's,
absolutely.
That's almost the irony there.
I think it does in many ways, right? I don't know how universities look at it though, whether they value it or they don't value it, because everyone's doing so much. In a way, I'm scared to tell my son to take it now, because
they absolutely value it, but they want to see what you've done. It has to be something.
But here's the thing, right?
Okay.
What you've done.
Yeah, fair point.
Maybe you've just worked on yourself. Maybe you've just taken a year to say, you know what, I just want to get to know the world. I just want to see what's out there. I just want life experience.
But that's still some. So yeah, so that's great. I'm saying it can be sitting at home playing video
of course.
games.
Yeah,
if it's like I just took 500 rupees and I'm like I took a train ticket, went here, went there,
absolutely,
odd jobs.
Yeah.
Like,
but do universities value that?
Princeton has a program. I had a friend from like Missouri, like straight up American, from redneck country, right? Got into Princeton. Princeton had this special program of spend 1 year. It's called the Bridge Year program. Go anywhere in the world, just hang out for a year, and then like write some report. You know where he came? He came to Varanasi. This kid
From Missouri.
from Missouri, Pakka American.
How the hell did he think of
spent
Varanasi?
a year in Varanasi. Spoke better Hindi than I did. Like
Amazing.
understood Indian culture.